The Garden of Earthly Delights is undoubtedly one of the most enigmatic and fantastical works in all of world art. Each of the numerous figures and actions in it carries its own unique meaning, and it is impossible to decipher them all within a single video. Therefore, we will focus on the key concepts and important moments that help interpret the work and explore what ideas Bosch had about people, earth, heaven, weaknesses, virtues, and where he drew his inspiration from. You might be surprised, but no matter how extraordinary Bosch was, many scenes in the Garden of Earthly Delights can be connected to drolleries found in the margins of medieval manuscripts. Drolleries are small decorative drawings that often have a humorous or erotic undertone. In ancient times, the term grilli was used to denote everything strange and unusual in art and fantasy. This word described unusual and non-standard forms in art. In medieval folklore, grilli was also used to describe foolish human behavior. Initially, this term was related to myths, tales, and legends, but later it was applied to visual images as well. In the margins of medieval manuscripts, one could see creatures mixed from different beings, strange and funny monster drolleries that were close to Bosch's artistic fantasy strategy. His hybrid creations and monsters were also based on a long-standing church tradition, represented in the Cathedral of St. John. Being a member of the Brotherhood of Our Lady at this cathedral, Bosch undoubtedly drew inspiration from the Gothic gargoyles, strange figures, animals, and monsters. In 1492, a baptismal font was added to the Cathedral of St. John, whose style resembled the unusual architectural forms depicted by Bosch. Hieronymus Bosch created his works surrounded by a rich visual and textual culture. Bosch's works often contain elements that refer to earlier works and sometimes even directly quote them. For example, in the hell scene from the Hay Wain, you can see a knight on a bull with a golden chalice in hand, an image that precisely reproduces the description from the Vision of Tundale, a journey through the afterlife. From here also comes the owl-like devil from the hell of the triptych, the Garden of Earthly Delights. Let's take a closer look at the plot of the Vision of Tundale. The storyteller narrates an unusual event that happened to a well-known Irish knight named Tundale, who was a wealthy, evil, and proud sinner indulging in all kinds of vices. He was a voluptuary, a thief, a patron of villains, insulted the church, sowed discord and gossip, was ruthless and greedy. Undoubtedly, Tundale was the worst of all men, but God and Christ, in their infinite mercy, decided to save his soul. One day, Tundale did not wake up. Divine forces plunged him into a state of catalepsy, where an angel showed him all the horrors of hell, conducting a tour of terrible and sorrowful places. Eventually, the knight's soul returned to his body, remembering the hellish adventures. The storyteller of the vision happily informs that soon the reader will learn all the details of Tundale's otherworldly travels. The adventures of the unfortunate knight began with a deal. After the meal following this deal, Tundale suddenly felt the approach of death and fell to the ground. His relatives and friends thought he was dead because his body was cold as a corpse, but his left side remained warm, so they decided to postpone the burial. During this time, Tundale experienced a special visionary experience that influenced the creation of terrifying images in medieval art. After 3 days, he awoke and told his story. Tundale's soul had left his body, not expecting to return to the world of the living. He was frightened and screamed, but there was no time for long lamentations. A horde of unclean spirits approached him, monsters with jaws, black, filthy bodies whose growls made the earth tremble. Their eyes burned with anger and fire, their mouths spewed flames, and their claws were sharp as steel. Monsters emitted a repulsive odor and inflicted terrible wounds upon each other. Demons recognized Tundale as one of their own, listing his sins and promising infernal torments. In the hellish darkness, gripped by existential fear, Tundale stood as a star appeared, in whose light he found hope for God's mercy. The star transformed into a guardian angel who reproached the knight for his sinful life, but reminded him of God's grace, capable of saving even him. The angel became his guide through hell. Such an expressive text undoubtedly impressed Bosch, inspiring him to create images close to the aesthetics of the Vision. The study and analysis of this work are not just necessary for understanding the imagery in Bosch's paintings, but should top the list of his sources of inspiration. Of course, not counting the Bible, which is undoubtedly the foundation upon which other sources are superimposed. The color and plot of the Vision are meant to lead the reader to repentance and fear of God, his punishments, the devil, and hell, which is a key point in interpreting Bosch's works. However, he was influenced not only by soul-saving, but also by secular literature. In the Garden of Earthly Delights, one can see the influence of the Roman de la Rose. This romance was known in secular circles and contained allegories related to love and temptation. The main plot revolves around a hero in love with the image of a rose and his adventures in a magical garden full of symbols. The image of the garden, often found in Bosch's work, refers to courtly culture and games in nature. The round dance around the lake in the central part of the Garden of Earthly Delights resembles dances depicted in illustrations to the Roman de la Rose. In the specific Morisco dance, riders hold birds, fish, and fruits in their hands, which is a distortion or mockery of symbols of high status, such as personal banners and family emblems that knights displayed during celebrations. The residence of the second Duke of Nassau, whose library housed the romance, was known for its sophistication, leisure, and gardens. In the well-known Eden amusement park, walks, processions were held, and there were slides, swings, and unusual automated fountains entertaining guests. Therefore, courtly audiences could easily recognize the allegories of secular debauchery in the central part of the Garden of Earthly Delights. Thus, literature provided Bosch with a rich source of inspiration for creating complex and allegorical images filled with symbolism and cultural references. This miniature in a medieval setting, depicting a feast in a public bathhouse, illustrates the French translation of the work of the ancient Roman author Valerius Maximus, made at the beginning of the 15th century. This work was actively used in medieval schools. It was studied for both facts and Latin. Among other things, Valerius Maximus has a famous description of baths with naked men and women bathing together. This illustration shows a man in exquisite attire and a king observing the debauchery. Bathers of both sexes are completely naked and feel no shame, while two couples in the baths and a couple in a neighboring room passionately kiss, anticipating intimacy. The lutenist and a dancing dog add courtliness to the scene. The bathhouse brothel earned a characteristic reputation for vice and debauchery, and often appeared in visual art as a composite image of the sin of lust and lechery, gambling, theft, and drunkenness figure in official complaints about such establishments. Given the illegitimacy of most such enterprises, the union of the bath and brothel in Valerius Maximus appears as a logical example to demonstrate the essence of the vice of luxury. In Bosch's paintings, there is a clear critique of gluttony, drunkenness, brothels, and luxury, as well as an interpretation of other aspects of this miniature: offerings of cherries, large loaves of bread, the lust of men and women, visual motifs found in scenes condemning debauchery. Overall, in the hellish scenes, the viewer systematically discovers allusions to debauchery, lust, and tavern brothels. Bosch also borrowed images from the works of traveling artists, such as Cyriacus of Ancona, whose giraffe found its reflection in the right panel of the Garden of Earthly Delights, depicting paradise. This was an era when discoveries and travels broadened horizons, and artists sought to incorporate new and astonishing images into their works to captivate and educate the audience. Descriptions of Marco Polo's travels in Asia and Africa, made between 1276 and 1291, became the basis for the famous and extremely popular medieval Book of the Marvels of the World, also known as The Travels of Marco Polo, and the book of the diversity of the world. Although today the authenticity of Marco Polo's tales is questioned, in the Middle Ages, the descriptions of wondrous landscapes and ethnographic notes left an indelible impression on readers, fueled by illustrations that were a common part of such manuscripts. These manuscripts, lavishly adorned with entertaining and fascinating miniatures, were copied and reissued as demand arose, and often became sources for new collections, anthologies, and amalgamations, which could inspire artists like Bosch to create unique artistic works. Distant roads always attracted people. In travels, one could find something astonishing, capturing the imagination. Returning home, travelers would speak of unseen animals, birds, and plants, and sometimes they would record their stories. Thus, the first zoological collections, Bestiaries, were created. In these collections, real lions, eagles, and beavers coexisted with mythical amphisbaena and basilisks. Why was this so? How could zoology be connected with theology and philosophy? Bestiaries were entertaining manuscripts. Indeed, one could endlessly gaze at the marvelous creatures. But they had a very important feature. They were not only entertaining but also instructive literature. The point is that each animal signified not only itself, but also some virtue or vice. According to the 12th century philosopher Alain of Lille, every creature in the world is a book, a picture, or a mirror for us. Following the biblical distinction between clean and unclean creatures, bestiarists contrasted animals symbolizing Christ, eagle, phoenix, pelican, with creatures associated with the image of the devil, toad, monkey. Nature was perceived as an arena of constant struggle between good and evil forces. Let's talk about some of these amazing animals. There is the hydrus. It is said that when it sees a crocodile sleeping on the shore, it immediately enters the crocodile through its open mouth, first rolling in mud to more easily penetrate through the throat. The crocodile instantly swallows the hydrus. Then it, tearing apart all the crocodile's insides, emerges unharmed. Thus, death and hell mean the crocodile, whose enemy is our Lord Jesus Christ. Taking on human flesh, he descended into hell, and tearing apart its insides, brought out those unjustly held there. He conquered death itself, rising from the dead, as the prophet mocks. Death, where is your sting? Hell, where is your victory? Or, for example, the leucroda. In its description, it is said that it is born in India and surpasses all animals in speed. It is the size of a donkey, has deer-like haunches, lion-like legs and chest, a horse's head, cloven hooves, and a mouth opening to its ears. Instead of teeth, it has a solid bone, but that's just how it seems. Its voice resembles the sound of a speaking person. It was never given an allegorical interpretation, which is why it is not a stable component of bestiaries, although it is quite frequently found in them. These examples show that Bosch's iconography is more closely connected to book miniatures and early engravings than to the works of his contemporary painters. Bosch's works, rich in references to visual and written texts of the Middle Ages, serve as a kind of bridge between the medieval and new eras. Many images in Bosch's works were likely consciously integrated by him after reading books kept in the Brotherhood of Our Lady's Library. However, some elements may have appeared without much thought, simply transferring into his paintings from the visual tradition of that time. In this sense, Bosch can be considered a sort of compiler who masterfully combined various cultural texts to create his unique artistic language. Moreover, Bosch's works abound with references to the folk culture of the Netherlands, including folklore, proverbs, and sayings. He also paid attention to daily life and festivities, reflecting his interest in secular culture, from traditional parades to hunting and courtly manners. The richness of direct and indirect references in Bosch's works makes the process of interpreting them both fascinating and complex. Bosch created an allegorical language that allows for endless interpretations of his works. He used common motifs and images, striving to make them understandable and accessible to viewers of his time. These elements were woven into the relevant medieval context so that everyone could view and understand them. However, Over time, many of these cultural codes have lost their significance due to the significant gap between our era and Bosch's. Therefore, modern viewers need restoration and explanation of these nuances for a full understanding of his works. In this video, we will only begin to unravel this tangle of allegories. After watching, I invite everyone to participate in the discussion. Share your thoughts on metaphors and allegories. Ask questions. Let's explore together the complex world created by Hieronymus Bosch. Before getting into a detailed examination, let's look at the work as a whole. The Garden of Earthly Delights is an impressive oil painting on oak panels, executed in the form of a triptych. Like other works by Bosch, such as The Last Judgment and The Haywain, the panels should be viewed from left to right. They combine themes related to morality and faith, showing how mortal sins lead to the gradual downfall of humanity, illustrating their detrimental consequences. In the traditional Christian context, this work represents an allegory of the world of vanity, where vanity implies the emptiness and futility of all temporal pursuits. Let's look at the triptych in its closed form. The outer panels of The Garden of Earthly Delights are executed in grijzeil, a painting technique done entirely in shades of gray or another neutral color, which was common in Dutch altarpieces to emphasize the magnificent colors of the inner panels. Triptychs typically had one important biblical scene in the center, with donors or saints on the sides. But in The Garden of Earthly Delights, all panels are an equal part of the story. Unlike images of saints and Madonnas, the narrative begins with an uninhabited earth on the third day of creation. The outer wings of the triptych depict a transparent sphere filled halfway with water. From the dark moisture on the flat disk of the Earth's crust, contours of land emerge. Above it, rays of the sun break through the swirling clouds, illuminating the surface of the Earth, which is marked by folds of mountains, covered in vegetation, and surrounded by the waters of the world ocean. But there are no animals or humans on it yet. The Earth lies in its primordial purity, still beyond good and evil. On the third day of creation, land and vegetation appeared. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. At the top, God the Father is depicted, looking down. God is shown as a small glowing figure in the darkness, with raised hands, which in medieval iconography signifies that he is speaking. An inscription from Psalm 33:9 on the left panel reads, "For he spoke, and it came to be," and on the right, "He commanded, and it stood firm." Bosch found inspiration in the Nuremberg Chronicle, published in 1493, which we will return to. The first of more than 1,800 illustrations in this edition depicts God the Father creating the earth, crowned, and seated on a throne. He holds a sphere in his left hand and blesses with his right, with a quote from Psalm 33 above him. It is worth noting that the sphere as a compositional element frequently appeared in the works of Dutch painters on the theme of Savior of the world, symbolizing the new world cleansed by Christ's sacrifice from sin. Thus, the depiction on the outer panels of The Garden of Earthly Delights may have a dual meaning: creation or salvation of the world. These outer doors serve as a prologue to what lies within the triptych. The outer panels show the formation of vegetation and strange hybrid landscapes, which are linked to the images inside, but humanity had not yet been created, and therefore could not yet abuse God's earth, the theme of the inner panels. On the inner panels, Bosch unfolds his universal concept of earthly life. The left panel depicts the Garden of Eden, much like in his other triptychs, about which I have a separate video. the link to which can be found in the description. What Bosch depicted here can be viewed as a kind of treatise on the origin and development of life on Earth. From prehistoric waters, strange winged fish, amphibians, and reptiles crawl onto land. In the background, he places a fairly accurate depiction of a fossilized dinosaur, seemingly anticipating modern paleontological data about the origin of life and its primordial forms. The artist populates this fantastical landscape with all known real and imaginary forms of the plant and animal kingdoms. An elephant and a giraffe coexist here with a polar bear. An Egyptian ibis with a gray duck. A salamander with a seal. A mythical unicorn drinks from the same source as a doe and a cow. Alongside exotic palms, orange, lemon, and dragon trees, grows the modest flora of the north. Frogs, peacocks, newts, storks, boars, cats, lynxes, porcupines, magpies, deer, swans, rabbits, kingfishers, various species of fish and plants, all strive for life, inhabit the earth, air, and waters, and mix with each other, generating countless new forms, turning the biblical paradise into a semblance of a botanical garden or zoo, where different, including hostile, species coexist peacefully. But this paradise harmony already contains the first seeds of evil and enmity. A cat holds a strangled mouse in its teeth next to Adam. A predator tears apart a slain doe in the background, and an owl nests in the fountain of life. Bosch depicts the creation of Eve on this panel, omitting scenes of the fall and expulsion from paradise, creating the impression that, contrary to church orthodoxy, he traces the origin of evil and sin not from the fall, but directly from the act of human creation. The central part of the altarpiece apparently represents the lush growth of the seeds of evil that already appeared in the Garden of Eden, on the soil of the Garden of Earthly Delights. Unseen fruits, part plant, part animal, part mechanism, composed of metals, minerals, and organic tissues, grow on this soil. Among them, hundreds of naked people move atop animals, engage in the most unreal relationships with them, nestle in hollow shells of giant fruits, and assume the most incredible poses. Bosch seemingly deliberately avoids direct analogies with reality here. The faces of the people lack individual characteristics. They are faceless and impassive, their poses deliberately artificial and often reminiscent of letters or hieroglyphs, their movements smooth and slow, as in a fantastical dream. The movement of the masses in the entire image is organized on the same principle. It begins in the middle ground with a procession of riders around an oval pond, unfolds in oval and paraboloid outlines of the foreground, and is emphasized by the rounded forms of fruits and plants scattered throughout the composition. Undoubtedly, many details of this work hold symbolic significance, and collectively they symbolize the sinfulness of human life. The depiction of hell on the next panel recreates the grim picture of retribution for it. Unlike the triptych, the Haywain, its analysis can be found at the link in the description. The rich atmosphere of earthly life, with its noise and bustle, is here replaced by the abstract detachment of rational symbolism. The depiction of hell has also lost its parodic reality and vibrancy. In the composition of its diverse forms, there is a kind of strict order, where sinners are categorized according to their sins and subjected to appropriate punishment with the formalistic punctuality of a bureaucratic institution, while the minions of hell, up to Satan himself, perform their functions diligently, but without much enthusiasm. Already in the background of the central part of the altar, strange metallic structures appear, resembling modern bathyspheres. Here, mechanical forms, processed wood and metal, gain absolute dominance. In the background of hell, Bosch gathers, so to speak, all the industrial technology of his time. Windmills, watermills, bridges, and enormous structures resembling forges and smelting furnaces. All of this functions like a giant fiery machine, emitting pulses of hot gas in a rhythmic pattern. This unusual penchant for mechanical forms and machine rhythms, which Bosch imbues in his depictions of hell, seems to be one of the most enigmatic aspects of his work. Did Bosch foresee in the harsh organization of the first manufactories, in the rhythms of working mechanisms of the primitive accumulation era, the traits of an impending machine civilization, alienating man from nature, and in his mind, did these traits form an image of apocalyptic retribution for the sins of earthly life? It's questionable but not impossible. By Bosch's time, the first visual signs of a new era were already appearing on the surface of the historical process, although their assimilation in art occurred much later. Bosch, as a genius director, orchestrates this vast mass of people, animals, mechanical and organic forms populating the inner panels of the altar, organizing their complex polyphony into a strict formal order. The inner panels are interconnected by a clear formal logical relationship. The bizarre shapes of the rocks on the left and central panels continue into the shapes of the burning structures in the background of hell. The fountain of life in paradise is logically opposed by the tree of knowledge in hell, rotted and turned into an empty shell. Their scales correspond to each other and form the compositional supports on which the tectonics of the entire image rests. Bosch's compositional mastery reaches in these panels one of the pinnacles of Renaissance art. However, the plot-temporal connections between them, as was the case in previous altars, are absent here. In the contextual content of the work, they represent different and disconnected ideas. They do not demonstrate a sequential process of development from the fall to retribution, but three main states of human existence, or if we include the imagery on the outer panels, four cosmic states of the created world, and only the compositional structure and symbolic subtext unite them into a single meaningful whole. When the panels are closed, Bosch presents us with an entirely different image. Triptychs usually had one important biblical scene in the center, with donors or saints on the sides. But in the Garden of Earthly Delights, all the panels are an equal part of the story. At first glance, the painting seems chaotic, but it is carefully planned. If we look at the very center of the central panel, we will find a hidden egg. It is the only unhatched egg on this panel, a possible symbol of new beginnings. If we use this A as the vanishing point, Bosch's composition gains order, and the action radiates from the center of the panel. Then, the three panels are connected by a common horizon line. They are divided into three parts: the foreground, middle ground, and background. The foreground contains the most important details. Each panel in the middle ground contains a body of water. A small lake with a fountain, a pool with bathing women, and a frozen lake. The background consists of towers, organic in Eden, and man-made in hell. Then, on each panel, there is a central axis that draws your eyes. Another way he connects the three panels is through repetition. A good example is Adam, whose pose is repeated on the second panel in the form of Eve, and on the third panel in reverse. All these visual elements unite the Garden of Earthly Delights. The free movements of his brushstrokes contribute to the expressiveness and liveliness of the work. This sets him apart from the mainstream traditional style of Dutch art, where the smooth surface and jewel-like brightness of the Van Eyck school were considered the ideal. Van Eyck left no brushstrokes or traces of the human hand. Bosch differed from the Dutch artists of his time and used a rather sketchy style, along with the impasto technique, where paint is applied thickly. You can clearly see the brushstrokes in the relief, which gives the surface texture. Bosch does not hide the act of creation. He allows us to see the personality behind the work. We'll stop here for now, and we'll definitely return to a detailed analysis in future episodes. However, this painting is a great basis for dialogue, which I encourage in the comments. If you have theories or ideas, I'd be glad to discuss them with you. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the continuation of this fascinating journey into the world of art. This has been Art Pastor. Until next time.